When I first started high school, I thought that my high school life would just be normal like other people. But then when the pandemic hits, we have to study at home, online learning through media such as smartphone, laptops, and computers. In the pandemic era, the government and our school has been trying a lot of ways to maximize the potential of our learning, including using methods such as online learning, offline learning, and blended learning or mixed learning. I am Baiq Silvia Ariani Putri from Senior High School Number 1 Praya will talk to you about how to maximize innovative blended learning in post-pandemic era. In the post-pandemic era, where the COVID-19 virus no longer exists, is online learning and offline learning still relevant to be used? The previous method before the pandemic, offline learning, allowed us to go to school and interact with our friends and teachers and directly learn from them. It is of course really good especially for practical lessons when we have to do things, but then it lacks resources. When at school, we can only use resources such as books that is provided by the school, and usually we are prohibited to use gadgets and internet accesses. So when there are tasks that is given by the teachers, usually students have a hard time to answer because they don't know the answer and can't find it anywhere. While in the online learning method that is newly introduced to us in the pandemic era, we are studying through our home, which we have more flexible time in studying and have more freedom when we are studying, so we are a little bit more relaxed. And we got a lot of sources from the internet. We can expand our knowledge. But the minus in this method is that there is no one monitoring us. So there is no guarantee that is what teach at online learning will be applied into all the students. Not all the students like this method because most students prefers to meet directly with the teacher so that they can understand better about what is being taught. And in today's cases, a lot of students didn't even know what they are studying because of online learning. They didn't pay any attention. That is why a new method is required after the pandemic era. The blended learning, or simply a mix between online learning and offline learning. So how do we maximize this new method so that the learning process can be effective? Firstly, there is a lot actually that we can do with blended learning since it's so flexible, but I will just conclude it into two ways. So the first one is we are directly applying it when we are at school. After the pandemic era, of course, we have to go to school. But unlike before, we are restricted to use internet access. After the post-pandemic era in the blended learning, we are allowed to use internet access to access resources and knowledge from the internet, so that the process of learning can be much more easier and the student can expand their knowledge better. What is the benefit of this method is that we are lessening the ways that is used in offline method. In offline method, we often use things such as papers, like really often. When we are given a task, we use papers, but when we are applying online learning also at school, the task can be easily given through our phone. And it is much more beneficial for the teachers too, because they don't have to spend all their energy into correcting all the students' mistakes and papers. They can just use the technology in their phone and can easily correct the mistakes. And the second method is that we split between online learning and offline learning. It's the same as the previous method, but there is a little bit difference. We go to school as usual, but then after we go to school, we are going to learn also at home with our handphone. But there is actually a lot of cons in this method because, as we know, Indonesian has spent a lot of time at school, usually from the morning until afternoon or evening. Of course, it would be too tiresome from the student's perspective to go study again after they went home from school. That is why we should create a new method, which is to split the school time. So first we are going to school, and after we are going to school, we are going to study at home. And this action, of course, has to be monitored by the teachers so that it can maximize the students' potential in learning. Why is this method needed after the post-pandemic era? In the pandemic era that has been going almost 4 years already, we are too accustomed in online learning. We are much more flexible and don't feel restrained. And suddenly go back to school might cause a little bit uncomfortable for the students. And it is proven that both methods have their own weaknesses. And to maximize the effectiveness of learning method, it is a really good idea to combine these two and use the potential to its max to increase the potential level of education in our country. That is why I think that blended learning is needed after the post-pandemic era, and to maximize it, we have to split those two or to combine it. It is up to our school to decide, and this is why blended learning is so important to be applied after the post-pandemic era. That's all from me. Thank you for your attention.